welcome to Ultiori. So in this video, we're going to be talking about issues with the Raised by Wolves show. Somebody made a comment, and I love when you guys give different perspectives because he or she asks questions that really need to be asked. Just because we like a show does not mean that the show is free from criticism or that the show is far from it. And even though I loved Raised by Wolves, it does have its many issues. And I have also asked these questions as well. So we're going to go ahead and feature this comment, and that's what this video is going to be about. So the comment comes from C North, and I'm going to be talking about the first character first. It's very good things, very good observations that he's made. I'm just going to call you he for now. I'm not really sure what you are, but so you started off saying the only thing I don't like about the show is how indestructible she is. But there's lots of holes in the show. Like, you can see her malfunctioning earlier on. She's supposed to be breaking down, and then she's just fine and also able to perform all of these taxing tasks and be completely impervious to weapons. On top of that, the story of her being actually from the religious side and being reprogrammed is interesting, but the fact that the religious side seems to have created such a weapon over the atheist side seems a bit silly, along with the fact that they don't even seem to know how to take her on, despite the fact that their side created her. So the reason why she's indestructible, and this is just my guess, is because she is a war android. She was meant to be indestructible, I guess. Not saying that there's nothing that can destroy her, we just don't know what that is yet. I think the reason why she's malfunctioning is because since they have put or reprogrammed her to have a nurturing personality, that seems like something that was not inherently supposed to be inside of a war and destruction necromancer android. So maybe there are errors to her system whenever she feels as though she cares or she fails at that specific thing she was programmed for. For example, if you have a piece of software and you tell it to do something, or even hardware. I'm not going to pretend to be a computer person. My partner is a techie, but I know that there are certain hardware and software that if they work together, but the hardware is not meant to handle the software is not optimized properly, there are going to be some errors. You're going to have a lot of crashes. I don't think that mother is optimized to be a nurturing type of robot. That's not what she was meant for based on what we know so far. So of course, when she fails and they program her to feel as though she's losing something, or to program her to feel pain and suffering, which is kind of messed up, then she has that error. She knows that things are supposed to work a certain way, and if she keeps failing, it's basically like a shock to her system. It's kind of like when I'm editing on Adobe Premiere and I start bringing in a whole bunch of very large video files. Even though Adobe is meant to handle all that, of course, I have a really good computer, but I don't have the best, and I just keep bringing them in and moving like really, really fast, and Adobe's like, okay, I know I'm supposed to be helping you edit, but Jesus Christ, I don't think I can handle this. And then eventually Adobe's like, fuck this, and just crashes. At this current state with my setup, this software, maybe this update that they have, and the hardware that I have, going that fast and bringing in all of those large video files just really isn't something that Adobe likes very much. So it crashes because it's basically like you're overloading the software. I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe a techie in the comments can explain it better, but you know exactly what I mean. Same thing with an air conditioner. If you put one air conditioner in a house that's really capacious and you expect it to cool down the entire house, not only is that air conditioner going to be struggling and constantly staying on because it can't reach that temperature that would keep the house cool, but eventually it's going to get so overloaded that it just busts. And I don't mean like bust, like, you know what I mean? But it's going to get so overloaded that it just stops working. It's just going to just kaput. It's working way too hard and it's failing at its job to cool down the house. So it's way overworked, way overloaded. It breaks down. I can use so many other different mechanical examples. It's no different than this android. Now, as for her being from the religious side and them having created her, that's totally plausible. After all, the religious people in the show do seem to be the elitists. Not long ago in our history, that was the case with religious leaders and organizations or even societies that were strictly superstitious or religious. A lot of them were the elite. They ruled over the people, and if certain things had happened at certain times in our lives or in the past or history gone by, the pendulum could have swung to their side of the fence, and that's all that's happening here. What if these people worship Sol, and yeah, that's the sun or a specific type of star, but what if they worship the star because some kind of alien thing came from the stars and gave them the technology to be able to do what they're doing? You could think of it as, well, they're really technologically advanced, so why would they believe in a god? Being technologically proficient doesn't make you exempt from being religious, so so I don't really understand why that would even matter. There are so many people that are engineers and creators and inventors that are also religious. I know that it seems as though mostly those people are not, because you have to have the mind to want to find answers and make things better instead of just attributing everything to your Lord and Savior or whatever that might be. But there are people who are religious who are in those fields, and it's totally possible for them to do that. Now we talk to the ethical side of it, because they created Mother as a weapon. Why would they do that? Well, simply to get rid of the atheist people. It sounds really horrible, but that most likely might have been the reason. Atheists were at the bottom of the pole. We don't know the history, the full history. Maybe the atheists were at the top at some point, but they diverged into these two groups. And I'm sure that if you look into the nitty-gritty of it, the groups are actually a lot more nuanced than they're shown in the episodes. But these atheists were against what the people who worship Soul represented. They believe that they were probably a scourge on the earth. It's no different than some people with religions that tell them to get rid of infidels. It's basically the same thing. Now you proposed a really interesting question. You said that she was reprogrammed. She used to belong to the religious side, but they don't even know how to take her on. Well, to be the devil's advocate here, I think the reason why those people were very surprised by her is, first of all, they didn't even know that there was still a Necromancer out there or on this planet. I mean, what are the chances that somebody caught this thing and then sent it away to a distant planet? For all they know, all the Necromancers were left on Earth. Also, just because it belongs to the religious side doesn't necessarily mean that all religious people know how to handle it. For example, if we have a rocket that crashes down in a certain part of the world and then you see NASA on it, or you see some kind of emblem that indicates that it belongs to the United States, if it is a rocket that belongs to your country, it doesn't just magically mean that you're going to know how to fly or operate that rocket just because it's from your country. You can look at a stick shift car and be like, ooh, that car was made in America. It doesn't mean you know how to drive it. I like that you even said that in the next paragraph, which is a total possibility, and that's very good observation. You said that from what you can gather, the religious side in the original planet they came from was the one who destroyed everything, leaving behind machines like her to finish off the survivors and used an ark to go colonize another planet. So maybe they created her as a weapon that they couldn't even stop. That is totally a possibility, and a very interesting one at that. That would explain why they're shooting their weapons at her and nothing can stop her at all. I think they can have tech that would protect them from her screams, or they probably have other androids that can be decoys like that android that they had, but once she's in weaponry mode, well, there's no stopping her, and you're totally correct. That is a likely case, which is pretty scary. But we do know there is a way to stop her, and that is if you take out her freaking eyes when she's not in, worn up T-pose.
How many people did you kill on Earth, Mother?
You are all my children. I'm only here to protect you.
So the next paragraph goes into saying, another thing that you find a bit off is why they both chose the same planet. If you know they're sending an ark to colonize another planet, obviously it would be the closest colonizable planet. So with the atheist side having the upper hand of seeding using smaller ships and embryos to get somewhere faster, you'd think they'd at least choose an out-of-the-way planet, one that would likely not be traveled to by the religious ark. After all, it took the religious side more than a decade to reach the planet. I think it was 16 years to be precise. In that amount of time, they could have reached another colonizable planet. You're totally right about that, and I had wondered that myself. But I think there are two reasons why that might have been. It could have been that the person who reprogrammed the android told her to go there because they knew that that was the only other planet that was colonizable, and the chances that they would find another planet, or if they knew of another planet that was also colonizable, it probably was too far away and he didn't want to risk like them going to that planet and then them malfunctioning and the children dying, or because there's no androids to take care of them. It's totally possible. Remember, space is very, very vast. So you could have a planet like Kepler B and you'll be traveling light years before you find another habitable planet for humans to live on. I don't think the person who programmed her was thinking, oh, well, maybe, maybe the religious people are just gonna go somewhere else and you guys can just be on one side of the planet and you'll be totally fine. I don't think that was the case. I don't think that they even had the time to really consider that, or maybe they just didn't have the prowess. I don't know. That's the real answer. I really don't know, but I think that if I were to make an educated guess, I would say that Kepler B is probably the closest known habitable planet that they could go on. But another thing I've noticed also with the show, they were not surprised when Mother, or Campion sent the signal out. They came and they're like, hey, what's your faith? Like, it was a normal thing to see a human on another planet. Like, oh, we're just living here, hanging out, whatever. It didn't seem like it was such a very big deal that there were humans on that planet. So I'm guessing there are humans on other planets as well. I don't think Kepler B is the only planet that humans have been to. I mean, these are spacefaring people, so I don't know. I really don't know. It's also possible that they weren't surprised because these people just aren't really fazed by anything. They know that there are other people who probably tried to escape when the wars were going on their old planet, so they just probably figured that this person is, you know, ahead of them. Or here's another possibility. You ready for it? They already knew that she was an android. They knew she wasn't human. Ragnar Lothbrok already knew she was an android because the only human being that would be able to reach that planet is someone who had built a spaceship way before and people would have known about it, or an android that could get there before all of them did. So they already knew. I'm pretty sure Ragnar, Travis, whatever his name is, already told them that, look, chances are that this is another human being on this planet is very, very unlikely. So we're probably dealing with an android here who has a human being. They probably even knew about the kids or the reprogrammed Necromancer. They probably didn't know at the time that it was her or that this was the exact android that was reprogrammed or stolen. It's possible that Ragnar's team didn't even know that there was a Necromancer stolen. But you can put two and two together, especially when you say that androids can reach planets faster and farther than humans. Now the next question, or the next concern, is this paragraph about her eyes. You said that you find the machines severely lacking capability in key areas. She has sonic eyes that can turn people into instant liquid or microwave them into masses of bubbled up flesh, but she has to use her eyes to visually scan around without infrared sensors or anything. Her hearing also seems to be extremely limited, as a kid and father whisper around her all the time. She was built as a weapon for mass extinction of humans, yet she has all these limitations. I thought that too when they were whispering. I thought she actually heard them, and I'm like, you're whispering, but she can hear you, bro. Like, what are you doing? But I think one of the answers to this question is her eyes are not the weapons. Her eyes allowed her to enter into weapon mode. I don't think her eyes are the things that basically make her a weapon. I don't know, but I think some way down the line, she's going to lose her eyes and then she's going to discover that, oh, Jesus, I guess I can be a weapon without my freaking eyes. I guarantee you that's probably going to happen. I think the eyes are basically the thing that says, hey, activate this mode. It's like wearing a different skin or wearing a different thing of clothes. Like if you're wearing Elvis clothes, you're like, ooh, this makes me want to dance. Or you're wearing something else, this makes me want to walk the street and beg for money to do services. That's a really horrible analogy, but I think that's the case with her eyes. I don't think they're weapons at all. I also find it weird that she doesn't have infrared sensors, because, and maybe she does have infrared sensors. Maybe she has thermal sensors and she can tell where warm things are. That's why when the people were under the ground, she didn't know they were there. But if anything's out in the open, she can find it pretty easily. Honestly, I think that was just written in to give her some sort of kryptonite, so she's not totally overpowered with no way of destroying her whatsoever. Like anyone's actually gonna get close enough to that thing to take its freaking eyes out of its head. I agree with you. I do find it weird that people can whisper and she doesn't hear them. But I think when they meant for her to be a weapon of mass destruction, they didn't want to put all the nuances and make her like the Terminator. I think they were just concerned about, look, just make something that goes around and blows things up. I don't think they were like, well, let's make it so it has supersonic hearing and has supersonic eyes. Humans are very easy to kill. And especially these poor people, they knew where they were. They didn't have all of those weapons and defenses, so it really wasn't necessary to the religious people or cost effective at all to make this thing with all of these other things if you're just basically sending out a freaking bomb, a mobile bomb at that, to just blow people up on sight. Now, what I do agree with you on is the radiation poisoning. I was like, they didn't think of that? Like, why? You didn't realize there was radiation in the food? I mean, you claim that your body breaks down and it gets radiation, but you didn't scan, like you didn't realize that. Yeah, they would have the capacity to figure those things out. This is something that should have been programmed into them. But being devil's advocate again, it's possible that the programmer was like, no, just make sure that you protect them. And he didn't consider that, which doesn't seem very likely unless he was rushing. He got this thing and he knew there was only a matter of time to go ahead before the other people got there. And he was like, you know what? Let me just put the basal stuff in and just hope that this works. It is also totally possible. I don't want to throw the programmer under the bus, but it is possible that he programmed these things, but he didn't have adequate enough time or space in a controlled environment to test these things. Because remember, the guy that programmed this was in hiding, so he couldn't really, he's not in space. He's never been to another planet. He's on this earth where there's being war and these atheists are being hunted. So it's not like he can go out there and be like, let me test this thing that I stole from the religious people out in the field to see if it works. It's totally possible that he did all of this just hoping that it would work, but couldn't test it. There's people who have programmed software before and they're like, this should work based on all the code that I've written and all the scripts I've done. This should work. And then you put the software up and the whole thing is just a white screen or something broke in the code and you're like, shit. And the only way that you can figure it out and make sure it works adequately is constantly testing the software. You can never do that or make sure that it works until you test the software. And even when you put it open to the public, people are still going to find bugs with it and be like, hey, why is this not working? This feature is here, but it's not working. Come on, programmer. And they get mad at the programmers and the programmer's like, okay, the only way I can test this adequately and test it quick is if a whole bunch of people use it and they let me know what the bugs are. And sometimes they feel like it's totally fine after they've tested it adequately and they put it out and they realize that shit, the whole thing's broken when somebody else is using it. My partner's a programmer too, so like, you know, I know it sounds weird because he's like, oh, he said this and he said that. He really is. Maybe one day he'll come on here and talk to you guys and you'll believe me. But yeah, I've seen the woes of it where he's asked me, hey, sign up on this website, see if this works. And like, yeah, it's not working. And he's just spent 16 hours on it just for it to not work. I could feel the pain. Like I tried dabbing in programming before and I'm like, I don't have time for this. I can't do this. It is so freaking tedious and annoying. And for all the work that you put into it, just to have one thing work and it doesn't work, that's very discouraging. So that's probably the case. This is probably what happened with Mother if I'm playing devil's advocate and I'm not attributing it to being bad writing. The other issue had, which I totally agree with you, they left the pit open. Even though their purpose is to protect the children, why didn't they at least build a makeshift fence around the hole? Same thing with the whole 9 months later scene where she's giving birth. And he was still building the shelter. It took him 9 months to build that meager shelter and it still wasn't finished. He's a freaking robot. He should have had it done in 1 week tops. Now, I totally agree with you the first part. I was thinking to myself too, why would you have the hole open? I mean, I know there's lots of holes and it's not cost efficient to go around covering every single hole in the vast expanse of where they are. But if you have children that wander off, I mean, I guess she didn't think that the children would be so stupid to go over to a hole and fall in it. But, you know, when Campion was climbing on the tent, she told him to get down because of the possibility he would fall off the tent, even though he was only like a foot off the ground. So she would have thought about covering up the hole. So that is very inconsistent with her personality, and that's bad writing. I do agree with that. As for the shelter, I don't know what the hell was going on there. They do live in a very hostile environment, so it is possible that Father was just like doing what a father does and repairing the shelter. I'm sure that things aren't going to stay perfectly fine the whole time. Maybe their shelters have broken down a few times and he's had to fix it. Again, I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm totally aware of this, but that is a possibility. The other thing you pointed out was, let's see, not to mention, you couldn't possibly colonize the planet with just 12 embryos. Not enough genetic diversity. They'd be inbreeding after a few generations. Oh yes, there definitely would be. I don't know what they were thinking with that, but I guess that's all the guy could get, because remember, these androids were programmed by a human being. So maybe that's all he could get his hands on, and hopefully that's what happened. I mean, that's kind of what happened with us too. We didn't have a lot of genetic diversity at first. Through mutations and breeding, that's what happened. And it's very weird. I'll tell you a very short story. I know you can skip past this if you don't want to hear it, but I used to breed gerbils. I love gerbils, and I only had two gerbils at first, the male and the female, and they bred like 30 babies. And I was like, okay, gerbils don't breed with their brothers and sisters, so I have to bring another female. I tried. I put them on neutral ground. I tried to introduce that female slowly to the gerbils. And the alpha mother and father, who I kept in a reptile cage, the other babies I kept in this huge cage with like 3 floors. and the female's name was Silver. I put her in the cage with the others after introducing all of them, all of my gerbils. And I know the lead gerbil, they do have a social hierarchy. I didn't even know this at first until I bred them, but there was a social hierarchy with the gerbils. So if the female, the lead female, who at the time was Phoebe, if she accepted the female, then everything would be fine. I put her on the stairs. She was the last one. All the others accepted this Silver female, the new one. And then I put Phoebe there, and Phoebe was not very happy. She was attacking the female. And then after a while, she left her alone. So I'm like, okay, all right, they're getting along. Silver's fine. I feel so horrible to this day. I feel like it's my fault, and I still have a lot of guilt over this, but I thought everything was fine. I put Silver in to the big cage with all of the offspring of the parents, the F1 generation, and the other gerbils were fine. And then Phoebe went all the way from the 3rd floor. That's where she had, you know, her nest or whatever, her food. She went all the way down to the 3rd floor or the 1st floor and just hunted down this female. And the poor female was running away from her, and no matter where Silver went, Phoebe would always find her and attack her. And do you guys know what happened? Well, because Phoebe was the alpha female and she was attacking the newcomer, all of the other gerbils started attacking her too. And I tried to put my hand in there. Holy shit, you guys, have you ever gotten bitten by a fucking rodent? It is the worst fucking pain you've ever felt in your life. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Dude, the pain when those things bite you. Holy shit. I put my hand in there. I was trying to rescue Silver. All the gerbils, like piranhas, like just constantly, but it was a freaking swarm. There's like 30 gerbils in there. They're all swarming this poor little female. I put my hand in there, and of course my gerbils would never bite me on purpose, but they're in the middle of fighting and attacking this one. So of course my hand is in the way. They're going to bite me. And Jesus, I felt red hot pain throughout my entire body, and I was shaking them, but I don't want to hurt my gerbils either by like throwing them on the ground. So I pulled out the female, and some of the gerbils were still attached, like their freaking teeth were literally inside my skin, and I had to like kind of dislodge them carefully because I don't want to hurt them. And I tried to get them off of Silver. The lead female, her jaws are still hooked on to Silver's body. Some of them are still hooked on. Eventually I got the female away from all the others, and I'm like, I can't put her back in there. She was bleeding all over. They were trying to kill her. Unfortunately, she succumbed to her wounds and she died like an hour later. There was nothing I could do, and I was so fucking sad. So I'm like, okay, I can't bring any other gerbils in here. I guess I'm just gonna have to keep, I don't know what I'm gonna do with them. They're not reproducing because they're all siblings. And do you know what happened, you guys? The brothers and sisters started breeding with each other. Yep, they all started breeding. And do you know what happened after that? Well, they all started breeding, and a whole bunch of other colors of gerbils started coming out. They were all the regular wild color, and then all of these white, cream colored Siamese, all of these weird looking gerbils started happening. There became genetic diversity. It was the weirdest thing. And as the generations kept going on and kept going on, I had healthy gerbils. And yeah, the brothers and sisters, their children bred with their cousins, and then they were fine. Something interesting to note based on my breeding of my gerbils, I noticed that also the litters, whenever the original parents would have litters, they were younger sisters and brothers of the older ones, and I would put those guys in the cage, you know, after introducing them on neutral ground. The bigger sisters or the older litters would always accept the little litters or their little baby brothers and sisters, even when they have not met them. Even when they're little baby pups, they'll accept them. They won't kill them or anything. So I think it's something about the smell. They can smell who they're related to, and they don't attack those. But Silver was a stranger that I got from the pet store, and they could tell that she wasn't one of them or didn't smell like them. So that's probably why they didn't accept her, or at least why the lead female didn't accept her. And yeah, perfectly healthy, perfectly fine until, you know, I don't even want to share what happened after that because then, you know, it's a very sad story. But anyway, the point of the matter is we all started out with not a lot of genetic diversity, and through genetic mutations, that's how we became who we are today. That's why we have a population like we do today. It is totally fine that I think 12 embryos, even though they only had 6, that part was confusing. That would have been totally plausible for them to start a population. Now, where I do agree with you, why it doesn't really work that well for humans is because, well, we are technically a case-selected species, so we don't breed that often. We don't mature recover as fast. So it would have been better for them to have way more than that. But maybe that's all the guy who programmed these androids could afford. Maybe that's all he could manage to get his hands on. It was a freaking mouthful. But I hope that answered some of the questions. I do agree there was a lot of holes in the show. There are a lot of problems and issues with the show. Just because we like it doesn't mean that it's impervious from criticism. There are issues that it's like, okay, that's just ridiculous. But the majority of the show is pretty good, so I can overlook some of it. I don't like when certain shows just force things in for the sake of pushing the story along, but if it's done in a way that's controlled and there's not too much of that, I can excuse it. Also, I'm excusing it a little bit because there's still a lot that we have to uncover about this show. There's still a lot that hasn't been explained, and I'm hoping that they will explain some of these later. You never know. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. This has been Altiori. You ask, we answer.